Welcome to everyone. This is a continuation of the discussion and the debate so that we can answer some more of your questions. The first two questions come from voters on community counts. The question with the most votes was from YouTube user LonelyGirl15, and this is the question. Given Bush's manipulation of pre-war intelligence and wiretapping abuses, do you believe this president should be impeached? I think George Bush has done illegal things. I think he's exceeded his authority, and specifically in the case of spying on the American people in clear violation of the law. I would not spend our energy on long-term, which I think it would take, impeachment proceedings. I think the better thing to do is do everything in our power to bring this war to an end, to move universal health care, to stop many of the abuses that have been occurring. And I do think, and I've said this before, that censure against this president does make some sense. But I think that the key to this is to have the Congress hold him accountable, hold him responsible for what he's done, and move on the big changes that this country needs so badly. The question with the second highest number of votes was from YouTube user Lunch for Life. 30 million Americans are described as atheist or agnostic. We've heard how you will appeal to religious voters. My question is, unlike George, how will you appeal to non-religious voters? Well, I have a very clear view about the separation of church and state. It's one of the foundations on which this country was organized. And I believe that while I'm a person of faith, that it's my responsibility to not impose that faith belief on the country and the development of policy or anything that affects the American people. Now, that doesn't mean that my faith is not important to me, and it doesn't affect my view of what's right and wrong. But I think the key is to have a president that can bring all Americans together around a basic set of values and moral beliefs, like helping the poor, the uninsured, doing something about what I think is a moral issue, which is the issue of global warming and climate change. Catherine from Maynard, Massachusetts writes, news reports about your anti-poverty tour last week indicate it was a political stunt. Please tell us what you have been personally doing for at least the past 5 years, hands-on work, not just talk, to help create jobs and better standards of living for the poor. This is no stunt. This is my life. It's the cause of my life. I have done a whole group of things, not just in the last 4 years, by the way. Before I ever became involved in politics or ever ran for anything, I was on the board of Urban Ministries, which is a faith-based group in North Carolina that helps the poorest of the poor, including the homeless. I have helped organize thousands of workers into unions so they can earn a decent wage. I helped lead minimum wage campaigns in at least 6 states. In the last election, it passed, and a minimum wage was raised in all 6 of those states. I started a poverty center at the University of North Carolina, where we've done serious work on what we need to do to end poverty in this country, including a book that lays out a comprehensive set of ideas about what we can do about poverty called Ending Poverty in America that I helped edit, coming from the Poverty Center. I started a College for Everyone program for low-income kids in a part of eastern North Carolina so that they'd have a chance to go to college without having quite so much burden of debt. And then outside this country, I've done humanitarian work in Africa and Asia. I'm not committed not only to ending poverty in this country, but to addressing the huge humanitarian needs in the world. So these are things that are not just talk. These are things that I've spent my life doing and always will. Kathleen in Exeter, New Hampshire writes, tonight you and Senator Clinton were asking about changing the American healthcare system. What would you do to get the insurance and drug company money out of our state houses in Congress? Well, first thing we have to do is we should publicly finance our political campaigns. These insurance companies, drug companies have entirely too much influence. Most of their influence is conducted through lobbyists. I have, from the first time I ran for the Senate, not taken any money from Washington lobbyists. I've not taken any money from PACs, which are by definition special interest groups. So I've tried to demonstrate my commitment to this cause by my own personal action. I've not taken any money from either of those groups in my presidential campaign. But I think the answer to getting their power away from them is to get their money out of the process, which means public financing of these campaigns. And I might add, we desperately need a president, I spoke about this tonight at the debate, who's got a history of taking these people on. Compromise and triangulation will not bring big change. Big change is going to require a president who has a long proven history of taking on insurance companies, drug companies, big corporate multinational companies. And I've done it my whole life and beaten them consistently during my life. This is Reed from Atlanta, who writes, you've laid out a comprehensive energy plan to see that the U.S. reduces its greenhouse gas emissions, but how have you individually responded to the climate crisis in order to reduce your global footprint? Well, in our presidential campaign, we came out very early with I committed to run the campaign carbon neutral, which we're doing. We're using all kinds of energy saving devices in order to accomplish that. In my own life, Elizabeth and I run our own home carbon neutral, and we drive a hybrid. We use solar power. So we're trying to reduce our own global footprint. And I might add, we've also set up a system by which those who want to reduce emissions and who want to do something personally about this issue, that if you go to johnedwards.com, you can see specifically the things you can personally do to help with this cause, which is a crisis. From Lindsay, sent by text message, is there anything you plan to do about the rising difficulty the American youth have in paying for a good education? Yeah, I assume that the question is about college. I mentioned briefly just a minute ago that we started in a place called Greene County, North Carolina, as a model, something called College for Everyone, where we said to the young people who live there, if you graduate from high school and you're qualified to be in college, and you commit to work at least 10 hours a week your first year, then we cover your tuition and books. It's a very simple idea. It has a work ethic that's required. It also helps alleviate some of the debt that young people are faced with. And so far it's been remarkably successful. We started it just a couple of years ago. So that College for Everyone, I believe, is something that we should have in the entire country. Megan from Burlington, Iowa writes, during the debate you were compared to Senator Clinton on women's issues. What makes you, out of all the Democratic candidates, the best voice for women? Very simple. Women are most dramatically affected by health care problems in this country for a variety of reasons. I was the first and most aggressive and the only candidate until now to come out with a clear, comprehensive, truly universal health care plan. So on an issue that directly affects women, I've been out front and leading. On the issue of the minimum wage, Congress has finally raised the minimum wage for the country. It'll eventually get to $7.25 an hour. It's not enough. Minimum wage ought to be at least $9.50 an hour, and by the year 2012, and it ought to be indexed. It ought to be half of the average wage so that it'll go up on its own. More women are affected by the minimum wage than men, and so I have led on this issue too. Out front, aggressive, leading. The same thing is true in ending poverty in this country. More women live in poverty than men. From the very beginning, I made poverty an issue. I announced my candidacy from the 9th Ward of New Orleans. I just finished a several-day poverty tour, which we've spoken about tonight. And on these substantive issues, as opposed to other considerations, I have been the person who's been out front providing bold ideas about what we should do about it. Tom from Nashville sent this question by text message. Senator, what would you do to make our tax code reward work over wealth? Well, right now we have a bunch of tax cuts that George Bush put in place for the richest people in the country. And on the wealth versus work issue, the capital gains rate's about 15%, which is significantly lower than the rate that working people, most working people pay on their taxes. That has to change. It's not right. And it means that somebody who makes their money from investments pays a lower tax rate than their secretary pays in many cases. In fact, Warren Buffett has spoken about this, and I think that disparity makes no sense. So I will, in fact, over the next few weeks, be talking about this disparity, about the fact that Bush, specifically, has valued wealth over work, and that we have to do something about it. Karen from Brandon, Florida writes, where do you stand on outsourcing American jobs, and what are your intentions if you're elected? It's got to stop. Very simple. We're getting killed, and there are multiple things to do. We need a trade policy that works. We need real environmental and labor standards in our trade agreements. We need a president of the United States who will enforce those provisions. I will do that. And then second, we need to get rid of the tax breaks that actually give incentives to companies to take jobs overseas. Those are the two most important things. And I might add, we also have to provide help to families and communities that have been hit hard by the outsourcing of jobs, so that there's a safety net in place for both the families, the workers, and the communities. How would you reform immigration? Do you believe illegal immigrants have the same rights as U.S. citizens to health care, schools, and jobs? Well, the answer to the substantive needs of undocumented workers is to give them a real path to citizenship. And I think on immigration there are three big components. One is that we need to secure our border, which is a mess, and a variety of money, people, technology, a variety of things need to be done. We need to be tougher on employers who are knowingly violating the law and in many cases abusing workers. And then finally, we need a path to citizenship. And that, I believe there should be some requirements for earned citizenship. It's not amnesty, but earned citizenship. And those requirements should include paying a fine in recognition of having come here illegally. And then secondly, learning to speak English. So those are the things that I would do to create a path to citizenship so that we don't have a second-class group of laborers in this country. Brian from Tucson writes, I'd like to know if you have a specific detailed plan in mind on how you would end the war in Iraq, bring the troops home safely, while continuing to provide security to our country. Yes, I have a very specific plan. If I were president today, I'd draw 40 to 50,000 troops out immediately. I would engage the Sunni and the Shia leadership into a dialogue to try to reach a political compromise, because that compromise is an absolute requirement to there ever being security on the ground. I would engage all the leaders in that region, including the Iranians and the Syrians, and other countries in the region to help stabilize Iraq, because they both have an interest in a stable Iraq. So those are the things that I would do, and I think I ought to have all American combat troops out of Iraq in between 9 to 12 months. Jody from Redlands, California sent from a text message. What will you do to make sure the Republicans don't steal another election? They stole the last two elections. Well, the answer is we have to have a voting system that works. And I believe that means paper ballots combined with, particularly for those Americans with disabilities, combined with a clear way for Americans with disabilities to be able to vote. But we need a paper ballot so that we can trace votes that are actually cast, and we know they're not being manipulated. These electronic voting machines are dangerous for our democracy. So I think that's the change that we need. In the short term, because it's unlikely that'll happen under George Bush, in the short term, we're going to have to be very aggressive about monitoring polling places, ensuring that, in fact, people who are entitled to vote get a chance to vote, and making sure that the votes have been counted. Yvette from Portland, Oregon writes, what can you do to be sure the American rancher farmer does not become obsolete? So much of our food comes in from other countries now. How can we get back to our roots? Pardon the pun. Well, I think we need to do a lot of things about the American farmer. One is we need to stand up against these big multinational corporations that are driving American family farmers out of business. That means enforcement of our antitrust laws. It means a moratorium on building these hog containment facilities. It means, I believe, we need country of origin labeling that's enforced. There was actually a law passed several years ago, but it's not being seriously enforced. And I think we ought to change the way we inspect food that's coming into this country. We've had huge problems with the safety of food that's coming into America, particularly from China. And I think the FDA ought to be given the responsibility right now. That responsibility is spread over a large group of people. And I think those are some of the things that we should do to make sure our American farmer doesn't disappear. I want to thank everyone for participating. Thank you for joining us during this live webcast. If you found it to be helpful and would like to do more, if you text the word GOOD to 30644, the word GOOD to 30644. If this is not something you'd like to see us do again, text BAD to 30644. It's not hard to remember. The number is 30644. Text good or bad to let us know how you feel. And on top of that, if you have other ideas about how we can make sure that we're hearing your concerns and I'm answering your questions in a real and serious way, I want to know that. Thank you all for participating.